Scary story. Hello everyone, my most beloved subscribers. I always try to be very careful when it comes to my personal safety in our world. Unfortunately, anything can happen and it's better to be on the safe side. I never stand too close to the edge of the sidewalk. When I'm waiting for the green light at the traffic light, I always share my location with my mom or sister, so they know that I'm okay, and where to look for me if anything happens. I try to be as attentive as possible on the street, especially when it gets dark. But with the last point, I sometimes make mistakes, and this terrible story is direct proof of that. In short, it happened last night. Well, it was well past midnight. I picked up my best friend. She was working the night shift at the hospital, and on the way home I decided to drop by my favorite store for some goodies. But chips, a chocolate bar, maybe some kind of energy drink, to make it through until the morning. This store is of course far from the center, in such a quiet, almost deserted area. But before, I always felt calm there. Although to be honest, it's so late I've never stopped there before. I leave the store with a full bag of food, and the old one, the cashier, was already closing the doors for the night, and turning on the light, and then something made me do something I usually never do. In my life, I decided to have a snack right in the car. Usually I try not to linger in deserted parking lots, especially when I'm alone, and at such a late hour, but apparently I was really hungry after all this driving. And after the recent breakup with my ex at home, I somehow don't feel comfortable at all. Anyway, I wasn't in a hurry. I turned on my favorite podcast on my phone about all sorts of chilling stories, and started gobbling up my sandwich. I'm enjoying the peace and quiet, listening to the presenter tell another creepy story. And then Deli is suddenly interrupted by a simply piercing female scream. I jumped up in my seat abruptly, tear my eyes away from the phone screen, and see some woman standing right in front of my car and frantically waving her hands at me. My car was parked right in front of the entrance to the store facing him, and only a narrow sidewalk separated us. I didn't at all. I noticed her approach. I'm telling you honestly, it was as if she just appeared out of the ground, like some kind of evil spirit. She walked around my car and stopped right at my driver's window and started pointing her finger down at the ground. Well, you all know that universal gesture, like, roll down the window. Yeah, she's running now, I thought to myself, although in appearance, she seemed to look quite ordinary, well-groomed, even somehow intelligent. But you never know what's on her mind. By the way, I always automatically lock the doors as soon as I get into the car. It's already like a habit for me. The woman apparently understood from my face that I wasn't going to open the window, and then she said something that just gave me goosebumps. "Hey!" she shouted, leaning closer to my window and looking inside. "Girl, excuse me, but there's someone in the back seat. Look." My mouth instantly went dry, as if I'd eaten a whole pack of dry cookies. Time seemed to have stopped, and in my head, all sorts of creepy scenes began to scroll through my head at breakneck speed. With trembling hands, I quickly unfastened my seatbelt and prepared to jump out of the car at any second and run as fast as I could if this maniac realized that I noticed him. Will I have enough of these precious seconds to escape and save myself? I tightly clutched the door handle with one hand and carefully tried not to make any sudden movements. I glanced in the rearview mirror and didn't see anyone there. My car is such a compact hatchback that there's nowhere to hide. Even in my terribly tired state, I would have definitely noticed someone there if there was anyone. My initial wild horror began to slowly give way to some strange bewilderment. I carefully turned in my seat, carefully examined the entire interior, and once again made sure that there was no one in the back seat. It seemed to have eased off, but some anxiety still remained. I turned to the window again to tell this strange woman that she was probably mistaken, as she took another step towards my car. Now she was standing almost right next to my door, and her fingers were already firm. They squeezed the door handle. Several more loud, insistent clicks were heard. She desperately but completely unsuccessfully tried to open my door. I looked up and met her gaze again, and then she smiled at me strangely. Such a creepy smile, as if only she and I knew one terrible secret. I got goosebumps all over my back when I was finally able to get a good look at her in the light of the dim street lamp. Her skin wasn't stretched tightly over her skull, so her thin, almost thread-like lips and narrow nostrils looked like slits in a wax mask. Her eyes were deep-set, a strange oval shape, and her teeth seemed somehow too small, and there were unnaturally many of them. I was simply glued to this eerie sight for a couple of long seconds, unable to take my eyes off her. And then, without even thinking, I suddenly put her in reverse and drove out of the parking lot at full speed for several long, chilling seconds. This woman continued to desperately hold on to the handle of my door. She was trying to keep up with my car, fortunately. Soon she finally let go of the handle, and I was finally able to break free and drive away from this damned parking lot. And I was feverishly trying to understand what it was all about, and why she was so persistent in wanting to pull me out. From my car, I was even more scared by the fact that her strange and frightening plan almost worked. I thought, what if there really was someone else who was hiding in the back seat, and whom I just didn't notice? And what did she need from me anyway? Maybe she wanted to rob me, Or was it something much more sinister? This thought haunted me the whole way. While I was driving home, I got home. About 20 minutes later, I was shaking all over like Casino in a leaf in the wind. I quickly ran into the house, and the first thing I did was check if all the doors were locked. The fatigue that was simply knocking me off my feet had now completely evaporated, and I couldn't calm my throbbing nerves while I was getting ready for bed. This creepy face kept spinning in my head, these strange eyes, and this chilling smile. And when I finally fell into a restless, anxious sleep, the nightmares were not long in coming. I had some kind of long and very vivid dream, most of which I fortunately don't remember anymore. But I know for sure that I woke up from a desperate, simply deafening knock on my front door. I sat up abruptly in bed, trying to understand if this was still a dream, or already a terrible reality. In the light of the glowing numbers on the alarm clock, I saw that it was now 4 hours 17 minutes and too early for such persistent, almost furious sounds, unless something really serious and important had happened, and judging by the force of the blows, it could well be true. I slowly and cautiously got out of bed, feeling goosebumps running down my back, and hesitantly headed for the door. I tried to enter as quietly as possible. I had never been in such a situation before, and had absolutely no idea how to react correctly. Fortunately, there was no smell of smoke, but this unfortunately did not mean that everything was okay. Anything could have happened. And then suddenly I hear a male voice saying my name with some strange intonation. The voice seemed vaguely familiar to me, but I could not immediately remember who it belonged to. "Who is there?" I shouted back, trying to make my voice sound as confident as possible, although everything inside was trembling. "It's me, Anton. My neighbor." Anton lives in the house across the street. We're not that close friends, but I often saw him walking with his dog named Squirrel. I quickly turned on the light in the hallway, but I didn't want to open the door in my pajamas. "What happened?" I asked, trying to hide the trembling in my voice, and went closer to the door. Well, he started, and I heard him clear his throat, and then he sighed strangely. "Do you have anyone now?" I asked again, and my heart sank with sudden fear. "No, it seems not. What happened? Why are you asking?" "It's just that my squirrel wanted to go outside. Well, you know, dogs have their own things, and while we were in the yard, it seemed to me that I saw someone in your window. Someone like that, I don't know how to explain it. Some kind of strange, as if it wasn't a person. I was just numb with horror. It seemed to me that I again found myself in some kind of terrible, endless nightmare." Turning around and looking at the dark corridor leading into the depths of my cozy house, I thought with regret that I hadn't turned on more lights. "She followed you. Promex." A thought. "She's somewhere here in your house with you." At that moment, I was ready to run out the door straight into the cold street, but by some miracle, I had enough common sense left to think more carefully about my neighbor's words. Something was completely wrong here. I slowly walked away from the door, trying to stay as far away from it as possible. "Anton, are you okay? You're talking somehow strangely." He cleared his throat again, and when he spoke the next time his voice sounded completely different, as if he was deliberately changing the timbre, making it lower, and somehow hoarse. "Yes, of course. Everything is completely fine. I just caught a bit of a cold. That's why my voice has gone bad. But I still really wanted to know if you're okay, and if you need any help." My voice trembled treacherously when I asked a question that suddenly pierced my brain, like lightning. "Anton, is your dog a small white one?" "Really? Her name is Belka, and she's always been a girl. You told me yourself." The neighbor didn't answer. The agonizing, oppressive silence. My mind was frantically rushing about, trying to understand where the danger really was, behind the door or already inside my house, very close to me in the dark corridor. After what seemed like an eternity of tense silence, the handle of my front door slowly but creakingly began to go down. It went down all the way, and came to a stop, into the lock. It began to shake violently. Someone outside was desperately trying to open my door. This was repeated several more times while this unknown person was checking the reliability of my lock. And then there was a deafening, powerful knock. The sound was as if someone hit my door with all their might, with a shoulder or foot, trying to knock it down. And after that, a frightening, weakening silence fell again. I stood rooted to the spot for another whole minute, afraid to even move. I unfortunately don't have a peephole, but I still plucked up my courage and tiptoed into the living room to carefully look into the window through a narrow gap in the blinds. In the distance, I saw a lone female figure slowly walking down the street away from my house. Although in the pitch darkness I could not make out her face, but something deep inside me knew that it was the same creepy person who tried to open my door. I watched her slowly walk away into the quiet dark night, until her silhouette was completely gone. Of course, the rest of this terrible night, I practically did not. I closed my eyes and either nervously wandered around the perimeter of my house, checking every corner and trying to figure out if there was anything suspicious, or I sat in the kitchen, staring at one point, and trying to make sense of all these strange and frightening events. The simplest and seemingly logical explanation seemed to be that I had simply dreamed it all. After all, just a few hours before, I was almost forced to open the door to a potential criminal. So it would be quite natural if I had a nightmare about a similar situation. But on the other hand, in my entire life, I have never seen such vivid and frightening dreams. Maybe in some incredible, almost mystical way, this creepy woman really followed me all the way home. Maybe she somehow discreetly attached some kind of beacon to my car. But how did she know the name of my neighbor Anton? And how was she able to imitate his voice so convincingly? It's just some kind of nightmare. It's already completely dark and I still haven't been able to leave the house. I am too haunted by an obsessive thought that someone, or maybe even several people are trying to somehow lure me outside. No matter how many times I check my house, I still seem to catch a glimpse of her every now and then, with her strange beady eyes and that unnatural smile. I think it's time for me to try to get some sleep. Although after everything I've been through, it seems simply impossible. But I needed to write it all down and share it with you, my dears, just in case something happens to me. And have you ever thought about whether you should blindly trust the warnings of strangers, especially at night? Take care and good night. But is it even possible, after such a story,